Walter, I, like many people, would love to know whether God exists, and I think this is a very important question. If I were beginning to think about this question, and I came to you as a philosopher or as a mentor, how would you advise me to even begin to think about this subject?
Well, I think you should think about it in the same way that you think about similar questions in other areas. If you want to know whether something exists, you engage in a certain type of inquiry. If you want to know whether a certain animal exists, you go and try to take pictures of it. A friend of mine, Peter Getzels, is trying to discover a new animal in Indonesia right now. If you want to know whether ghosts exist, you would engage in certain types of explorations. You would look for studies where you could get pictures of ghosts. You would talk to people who say they experience ghosts and see whether their stories are coherent. Look at the circumstances under which they claim to experience ghosts and ask yourself, are those circumstances under which people's beliefs are reliable or unreliable? It seems to me that you should approach the question of the existence of God in the same way that you approach all these other questions of the existence of other types of creatures or entities.
My initial reaction is that's exactly what I would not do. And here's why. Because as I define God, and it's not necessarily in an Abrahamic Western tradition, but in the broadest sense, by the very definition, it is therefore different than everything else I know. It's certainly different than animals, and ghosts don't exist, so I don't know if that would be relevant, but it's different than all the abstract mathematics. It's different than the quantum physics. It's different than anything else I know of. It is a potential cause of everything that exists, and imbuing it with purpose, all sorts of things that we can spend defining it. And so by that characteristic, by it being different than everything else, I think that I can't use the same kinds of inquiry that I would use for everything else. That's my problem.
Well, then what kind of inquiry are you going to use?
That's why I'm coming to you.
If you don't use your senses and you don't use the testimony of other people, then you can try to use arguments a priori, as they say, prior to experience, like mathematical arguments, and see whether those work, because you want to know whether imaginary numbers really exist or something of that sort. You need some kind of evidence. You shouldn't believe that things exist without some kind of argument, be it experience, testimony of other people, a priori arguments. If you don't have anything of that sort, you ought to at least suspend belief and probably deny that the thing exists if you think that there should be some reason if it did exist. Now notice that if it's the kind of entity that you wouldn't have any reason to believe in, even if it did exist, then the fact that you lack a good argument or don't find one isn't going to show you it doesn't exist, right? So you have to ask also, what kind of being is this?
Right.
Is it the kind of creature that I can discover, or is it the kind of creature that even if it existed, I couldn't discover? And if it turns out it's the kind of creature that even if it existed, I couldn't discover, then there's not much you can do.
That may be the conclusion that we ultimately come to, and I certainly do not want to believe in God based on fallacious arguments. I mean, that's something that scares me, because I know I'd like to do it, and I absolutely want to avoid fooling myself. And so I have that reservation about going down any path that would give me a conclusion that I think I would like to have.
Well, then let me give you some advice. People are not good at finding the fallacies in their own arguments. If you want to know whether your arguments have fallacies in them, you should talk to other people. And you should listen to other people when they point out what they think are the problems in your arguments. That's one way to end up with a better argument. Because a lot of people just give their own arguments, they don't listen to the other people, and there are fallacies in those arguments, but they never find them out. So the first thing to do, if you want to find out whether or not God exists, is what you're doing right now. Listen to the arguments on both sides.
Yeah, okay. But I sometimes feel that I like all of the arguments on the critical side, that is arguments for the non-existence of God, Except at the end of the day, I feel that I still have a feeling that God exists, even though I sort of agree with all the arguments against it.
Yeah, but now we're back to
irrational?
ghosts. Now we're back to ghosts. You've got all these arguments against ghosts. You've got no good reason for ghosts.
But I don't believe in ghosts.
Okay, but
I
if
do
you had
potentially believe in God.
if your sister, I don't know if you have a sister, but if your sister came to you and said, I feel that there's a ghost in my attic. I have no reason to believe in this ghost. I have lots of reasons to deny the existence of this ghost, but I feel that there's a ghost in my attic. You wouldn't think that she was holding that belief in a rational way, or that she should hold that belief.
No, I wouldn't.
Right, you'd feel sorry for her. And that's the way atheists, I think, often view people who believe in God. They have this feeling, they've just got no reason to form any belief on the basis of that feeling.
Now, there is a view promulgated by Alvin Plantinga, most famously, that calls the belief in God properly basic, which says that that type of belief is as legitimate a fundamental belief as the fact that I remember that I did not have breakfast this morning, or that I believe in my own personal consciousness and I infer your personal consciousness. These are sort of immediate things I don't have to even have an argument for. They are so basic, and that the God is indeed that kind of belief. So it's not that I have to gather other beliefs from the world to see if they result in God's existence, but God is one of the fundamental beliefs in which I use to analyze the existence of other things.
Right. And I love that phrase because it's got two parts to it, basic and properly. I agree it's basic. It's one of the fundamental beliefs that Alvin Plantinga and many theists use to find their way around in the world. It's basic in the sense that they've got no good reason for it, they've got no evidence for it, but they still believe it. Now the question is it properly basic? So let's look at the two examples you give as analogies. Do I really remember what I had for breakfast this morning? Well, if I stopped trusting my memory, my life would be in a lot of trouble because it's very difficult to check those things in the past in any independent way. You have to rely on your memory or you'll go crazy.
Sure.
And your consciousness is the same thing. If I didn't believe that I had a personal consciousness, I don't know what my life would be like. I'd go insane. So you can't really live without those beliefs. So if you treat them as basic and believe them without evidence, that's proper, because insanity is the other way.
Right.
The other side of theism, it might be basic, but people who don't believe in God, they're not insane. It's not like giving up trust in your memory or your consciousness. You're still a perfectly sane person. And Alvin Plantinga, if he gave up belief in God, would also remain sane. It wouldn't drive him crazy. He might think that it would, but believe me, I've been there. It wouldn't. And so it's not properly basic, even if it is basic, or at least it's not analogous to memory and consciousness.